Hello there! Welcome to Heartpanorama, a podcast that will take you on a journey through aspects of everyday life, such as personal development, life hacks, and other relatable topics. My name is Michelle, and I'm excited to share some of my thoughts with you in this podcast series. While I talk about today's topic, I'm mentioning certain brands, products, or services. Any form of product placement in this podcast solely serves discussion purposes and is not paid or sponsored in any way. Today is Mother's Day in Germany, and also at the end of this month, it's going to be Father's Day as well. So when I thought about what topic I'd like to talk about today, I figured I could talk about my cultural heritage. So before I get started, I'd like to explain my cultural background real quick. So my mom is from the Philippines and my dad is coming from Switzerland, and I was born in Germany and I also grew up in Germany. So I have had a multicultural background from the start. And in this podcast, I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, but maybe other biracials out there can relate. So if you have anything to add to what I have to say at the end of this podcast, then feel free to comment below. Growing up, I really didn't know what culture to identify with more, because in Germany, I've always felt like a foreigner, and in Switzerland, I felt too German because I couldn't speak the Swiss German language, and I automatically sounded different from all my relatives and all the other people there. So I also kind of felt like a foreigner, even though I have 50% Swiss genes, and I used to be very proud of being Swiss and kind of neglected my Filipino side. So a huge chunk of my childhood and teenage years were somehow characterized by me not acknowledging that I am half Filipino, and I only acknowledged it really when it was convenient in different situations. For example, when I met my mom's friends who were also Filipinas, and I wanted to belong and wanted to feel like I'm part of the group. So that was when I actually accepted being half Filipino just so I could fit in. The dilemma is that you want to belong, but wherever you go, you're always different. In my case, when I was among Swiss people, I was partly Swiss, but I felt different because I had the other half that wasn't Swiss. And when I was among Filipino people, I knew I was a part of them because I'm half Filipino, but I always was aware that there is a part of me that isn't. And it's always been difficult to come to terms with that. It really took me a long time to accept both my cultural backgrounds, and only recently in my early 20s I began to actually embrace my Filipino half as well. For example, a few years ago I started watching Filipino movies and listened to Filipino music. I still can't speak the language, but at least I'm more familiar with it, with the sound and the common habits, and I feel more secure when I'm among my mom's friends, for example, because I don't feel completely left out. I can still understand a few tidbits of what they're saying when they speak Cebuano, for example. And it's actually a funny story how I got into watching Filipino movies in the first place. Shortly before I got into that, I actually watched Japanese and Korean dramas first. So maybe that might have led me there. Maybe that was what I needed to feel the need or the urge to start watching Filipino movies or dramas as well. So I don't know if that has something to do with that, but I remember when I watched Japanese and Korean series, I felt like that is kind of similar to the Filipino culture, or, I recognize these elements and I think they might be similar to what Filipino people think or what their mentality is like. And that's actually when I was more interested in actually watching Filipino movies. Whenever people find out about my cultural background, they often ask me questions about what it's like in the respective countries or cultures. And I understand that they're curious, and it's fun most of the time to explain different details or things that I noticed in the different cultures. But it's just that I'm not 100% Swiss and I'm not 100% Filipino. And I didn't grow up in either of the countries, so I only can tell snippets of what I learned through my parents or my relatives when I visited the countries, but I will never be able to actually tell people confidently what things are actually like in the different countries. And even though I got more confident over the years with being Swiss Filipina, this aspect will always remain. I will never be able to say I grew up in that country, I know what it's like, because I can't. And I'm not saying it's a problem, it's just something that I want to state because it is something that I've thought about a lot. So most of my friends here in Germany are actually German and also have German parents. And I remember, at least back then in school, that some of them claimed that I'm more of a German because I also grew up here and my mentality was shaped by living in Germany. But I kind of dislike this point of view because firstly, they don't know or they don't understand what it's actually like to have a different cultural background. And yet they think they can't tell you who you are or what you are. And I am not a German because growing up in my parents' household also means that I was taught their values, and plenty of these values come from their respective countries, which means from Switzerland and from the Philippines. So I can't really come to terms with the fact that people say I am actually a German because I grew up here, because that's not the only thing that defines a person being a German. If you have friends with a migrant background and you aren't a migrant yourself or your parents aren't migrants, then please don't put labels on your friends, please, because you can never claim to know how they feel or what they felt growing up because of their different backgrounds. And if you're interested in what it was like for your friends growing up, then just talk to them about it. Ask them openly. Ask them about how they feel about living or even growing up in a country that neither of their parents or grandparents grew up in. Maybe find similarities and differences in your upbringing before generalizing everything. And just to make it clear, I'm not mad at the friends of mine who said those things because I understand that they might not even realize the differences. But I don't want to be put in a drawer, and I think many other people in my situation wouldn't either. I don't want to claim that I've now defeated my insecurities 100%, but at least I try more actively to embrace both sides of my cultural background. And of course, the third aspect that I grew up with because I grew up in Germany. And it's not so easy to unify all these facets in my one personality, but in fact, they're all part of who I am and make me unique. And that's what I had to realize over the years. And I think especially growing up, it's hard to understand this, that it's those things and those little things that make you special. And you have to learn to accept it and realize that it's a good thing. Not being the same person as everyone, and learn to feel more confident about yourself. Do you also have a multicultural background, or do you have friends who do? And what are your experiences regarding the points I mentioned in this podcast? Are there any other aspects that you feel you're alone with as a biracial and that I didn't mention? If so, then please let me know in the comments and let's discuss this topic further. That was today's episode of Heart Panorama. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give it a like and leave a comment. Stay tuned for upcoming podcast episodes by subscribing to my channel and activating the notification bell. Check out the links in the description to find out where else you can find me and my podcast. Have a nice week and take care. Until next time, bye!